a lot of things come up that otherwise wouldn't. I would compare my use of social media to a drug. I have this temptation to run. I feel like sometimes I've done this with people too. But I think the most extreme version of this, moving out is really hard. I thought I was behind, but upon reflection and some research, I've realized that everyone moves at their own pace. Today, I want to share a little bit about the different ages people move out around the world and what home means. If you're new here, my name is Maya Pimentel. I make videos about trans queer culture, and sometimes I just talk about more general culture, like today. So I moved out at 25. I thought I was behind. I felt behind, definitely. And it was really hard. It took a lot of support from people that care about me. And every time I've moved, I've needed support. It takes a lot of work, paying deposits and first months. It takes extra funding and so forth. So I had a lot of help, which was cool. But when I finally did move out, had my own room, I felt like I was behind. I felt like I should have been here ages ago. So I did a little research. In the US, 24 is the average age. I'll link the research below that I looked into. But the main reason for that higher immigration population, I'll get into that in a moment, and the pandemic really skewed these results. And then in Peru, the average age, I believe, is 27, which skews a lot later, 27, 29, around there. And this is because Peru has a different culture, a different pace, a different way of seeing the world. So I'm really not behind, I'm pretty average. In Latin American cultures, people tend to move out a little later because there's more of a sense of family and community, of staying at home. That independence streak that many Americans have isn't as prevalent. Of course, people are independent, but they're not rushing to leave. Even though the age in the US is 24, people tend to be pressured or want to, or there's at least a perception that moving out sooner rather than later is important. Some people move back in with their parents and it's not really a victory lap, it's more of a, I need to save money so I'm gonna move back. Thankfully my parents have an extra room. Whereas in Peru, not leaving until you're married or until you're in a long-term committed relationship is a lot more common. I think they both have their good things and bad things. I think moving out has really helped me gain some perspective, come up with what it means to be myself, independent of my family. I think part of growing up is having to depend on yourself for your rent and your food and the chores and everything. So that's really important. I think in some regards, Latin American families tend to have some harm in the fact that they stay home longer. I think certain family dynamics, toxic or just unhealthy habits of how you treat each other can be perpetuated longer and aren't really examined, because spending time alone, living by yourself, really helps you figure out who you are in the world. And if you're just moving from one family to another family, you don't really have that time to reflect. So I would advocate for more Latin Americans moving out sooner and finding their place independent of anyone, before moving into another family. I found an article by La Republica, a Peruvian news source, citing economic reasons for this. I think it's kind of hard, these terms of economics, moving out. I was doing some very broad, unscientific research, just like calculating that my room when I lived in Peru about a couple years ago was about $100, and the minimum wage was about $1 an hour. So it was about, the monthly rent was about 100 times the hourly wage. And when I look around California, that was a shared room, and shared rooms are anywhere from $800 to $1,500 or $1,600. So the minimum wage here is $16 an hour, so it can be 10 times the minimum wage. So how much things cost doesn't really matter, and obviously it's a big deal when you're moving out how much things cost, but what really matters is the ratio, of course, between how much you can make and how much you need to spend. So I think in order for more young people to move out, that ratio has to close. Like maybe it's only 5 times as much as your hourly salary when you're first starting out. So anyhow, moving out, different around the world. In Europe it tends to be younger too. A lot of it has to do with this cultural impulse we have as Americans to move out, to go on your own, which isn't something exclusively American. Plenty of other explorers and independent thinkers come from other countries. But there is a general sense of, ideally you move out and you buy a home. It's something people at least strive towards. Whereas in Latin America, I feel like there's more of a community, and that has a lot of positive aspects too. There's a sense of togetherness, there's a oneness, People say hi to each other in the streets. Now, I lived in a small town in Peru. I'm not speaking for the whole country. I'm not speaking for all of Latin America. But there is a community and a sharedness that comes from a culture that looks out for each other. That is also important. I think ideally there would be some middle ground. You know, maybe living in a community where each one has their own space, but also can come together. Because I think either extreme of not having your own space, not being individual, and then being so individual here with the US, where there's so much loneliness and isolation and a real lack of community, especially when you take religion out of the equation. We need spaces to come together and be together. That's where roommates come in. I'm going to be moving soon. I'm going to have roommates, so that's going to be a new experience. And right now I just have a little room apart. So yeah, that's kind of the cultural differences. And next up, I want to talk about a little bit about my experience. For me, it's been really hard to move out. Depending on myself, a lot of things come up that otherwise wouldn't. My depression, like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I don't have a depression, but then I'll have trouble getting up and going to work. I have to get up and I have to feed myself, and it's been hard. Getting a little easier now. I would encourage you to move out because I've learned so much about myself. I've learned what I want and just who I am in the silences between scrolling and finally making art and going to work. A big part of moving is learning to take up space, and it's something I'm still getting the hang of. I just put up this art. I kept having this feeling that I couldn't settle down, certain anxiety filtering through, like, this won't last. Having confidence that you can support yourself is hard. And it's something I have to learn. Growing up, we moved a lot. Sometimes we stayed in the same city, but often we would move houses every year. My family was low income, and I understand why that happened, but it created a pattern and a habit of never really settling in, of keeping things easy to move, don't get too comfortable, you're gonna have to move soon. And that was growing up. I went to 7 different schools by the time I graduated high school, and after high school, I kind of took on my mom's habit and my grandpa's habit. He liked to move too, every 2 years. My aunts and uncles were born in different countries. I picked it up. When the pandemic came and things got hard, I moved to Peru. I made a video about it. And then in Peru, things got hard too, because I was realizing I was a girl and it was hard. So I think I would have been really hard to stay there just because of the lack of resources for trans people and the lack of community for trans people. So I left again and I moved back. And then I left Santa Rosa and I moved to Oakland. And, you know, several weeks ago I was thinking about moving again to Europe, or I was even floating the idea of Argentina, but I find that I have this habit of not staying in place. I never settle long enough to get to know myself, to get to sit with the silence of my mind and see where it wanders, see where the anxieties go, see where the thoughts go. I feel like moving is sort of like distracting yourself with something else. I would compare my use of social media to a drug, personally. I use it to avoid thinking about my feelings and important things and just let my mind become numb. I'll do this with TV shows, social media, even movies, and always try to justify it. Maybe I'll stay up all night watching a show because I'm feeling sad. Even last night, my other camera, the SD card reader isn't working. I'm gonna have to repair it, take it to a repair shop, and instead of sleeping, I watch a show for too long. And it's this way of numbing away feelings. And it's a little way, it's an inexpensive way. I feel like sometimes I've done this with people too, where I get too attached. And then my life is their life, and I don't have to think about mine. But I think the most extreme version of this is leaving the country, moving to a new city that's, you know, a few hours away, and starting up again and lifting everything up. And then when you move, you have to figure out housing and food and so many other things, and not letting myself settle kind of stops me from having to reflect on where do I want to go, because I'm always catching up to myself. And now I've been in Oakland for about a year. I've caught up to myself. I could run again. I could escape. But there's no real reason to, other than the fact that I'm uncomfortable emotionally. I'm at a tricky place where I don't know where I want to go, like most people, honestly, at any age. But instead of just staying and reflecting and doing this, I have this temptation to run. So I'm having to get rid of that and learn what it is to have home, what it is to stay home, what it is to have plants that grow, art that decorates. That's something you have to learn. Maybe you didn't move a lot as a kid, so moving isn't a big deal for you. Maybe you have moved a lot, but you're able to take on home whenever you can. I need to rush into home a little more, the way I've rushed into relationships sometimes. Instead of kind of never unpack. I've got some stuff that I haven't unpacked, and I haven't put up shelves, and I just feel like I can't settle. I'm worried something bad is gonna happen. In about 10 days, I'll be moving in to a new place. So now, for the first time, I'm making the intention of moving in entirely, fully, taking up space, making it my own, putting up my art, unpacking everything, putting up my shelves, making it a room that you'll get to see through my filming, and letting it be home, and letting there be silence, and not running away from that silence, and depending on myself, giving myself enough time to have roots instead of always being a little plant that's constantly plucked, dig in deep, be from Oakland, be part of the community. Little by little, I'm getting to know people and getting to know this city and becoming a part of it, as everyone else who lives here is a part of it. And finally, as I sit in silence, I can hear the voice under all the anxiety that says, "Welcome home." Thanks so much for watching. My name is Maya. This has been Moving Out and Home. I've been having a lot of trouble making videos lately. I've had some creative block. Finally made a video. I'm gonna fight it and keep making videos. So thank you for your patience, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.